I'm Leo Hartig. On April 4th, a small bit of history was made when a contingent of South Dakotans became the first non-political group from the United States to visit Cuba since the Revolution of 1959. This is their story.
Come on, Jim.
No.
It was 7 o'clock in the morning when 6 players from the University of South Dakota and 5 from the South Dakota State University basketball teams began arriving at the Sioux Falls Air Terminal to begin a trip which no one their age had ever made before. Through the efforts of South Dakota Senators George McGovern and Jim Abourezk, the young men had been invited to play basketball in Cuba, the island nation which has been estranged from the United States for just about the length of time that each of the players has lived. The men were accompanied by their coaches, school officials, friends, and members of the news media. It was cool and windy as the entourage of 71 people loaded their luggage aboard a Southern Airways DC-9 jet for the 7-hour and 40-minute flight to Cuba. Aboard the plane, a holiday atmosphere prevailed. There was little thought of the significance of the trip or any apprehension about landing in an unknown country. In the flight cabin, there was no fear of landing at an unknown airport either, because 4 out of the 5 crew members on the charter jet had landed in Havana twice before, both times as victims of the United States' last hijacking to Cuba. In 1972, Flight Captain William Haas, First Officer B.H. Johnson, and flight attendants Karen Pogue and Donna Albritton were held captive by 3 armed men who forced them to crisscross the United States for 30 hours, landing twice in Havana. The second landing excited the interest of the world because during a forced stop at Orlando, Florida, the FBI shot out the DC-9's tires, hoping to keep it on the ground. But at the point of a gun, Captain Haas did the impossible. He took the plane off the runway and landed safely in Cuba, where the hijackers were arrested and are still being held. A book about that flight will be published next August. Well, with that much experience on board, the Cuba tourists could afford to relax as they flew toward Washington to pick up more passengers. The only ones thinking about the games, apparently, were the coaches, and they talked with KELO sports director Jim Burt.
Gene, you've had a few practice sessions with this combined SDSU-USD basketball team. Are the boys taking these workouts seriously, or are they just sort of fun time for them?
Oh, Jim, you know, the kind of people that we have on the 2 squads, they're taking things very serious, and they're anxious to go down there and do the very best job that they can of representing South Dakota and the United States. And we heard last night that we were playing a portion of the Cuban Olympic team, and we realize, of course, how strong they are and how physical their players are going to be. And but at the same time, we have people that have a lot of pride, too, and we're going to do the very best job that we can. And they're going to play basketball first and have it be an educational experience second.
I think right now that maybe this is being blown out of proportion. When this invitation was first received, it was supposed to be kind of a goodwill tour for the South Dakota players to make this trip. And I think right now, after watching television last night, they've kind of put the fact in there that we're representing the United States. We're not representing the United States. If we were representing the United States, they would have picked the 10 best players in the United States to go down and play this team.
In Washington, D.C., the plane landed long enough to take on 29 more passengers, VIPs, and members of the Washington and New York press corps. Another hour and 40 minutes, and the plane doors opened on a new world. Havana International Airport, where the scene was a wild scramble of picture-taking. Cubans were shooting Americans, and Americans the Cubans. Everyone wanted to record on film the strange visitors or the strangers they were visiting. Somehow in the crush, the basketball players managed to escape unnoticed and made their way to the lobby to wait for transportation to their hotel. 3 luxurious buses were soon whisking them and the rest of the South Dakota group on a 40-minute drive to the resort that was to be headquarters for the remainder of the week. The drive, always with a police escort, took the visitors past country and city scenes alike. There were stretches of ghetto areas, factory sections, sugarcane fields, broad landscape boulevards, and breathtaking views of Havana facing the sea. The Players Hotel was far out of town, set in a special tourist compound. The Mer Azul, it's called. It's operated by the Government Tourist Bureau and is meant for foreigners only. Cubans don't stay there. But even the average tourist does not receive the kind of attention given to the South Dakota delegation. Everything was special for the visit, including a whole platoon of new hotel workers to take care of the visitors' needs. This became evident at the welcoming banquet the first night on the island. The dining room was crowded with Americans and Cuban officials. The food was exotic and elegantly prepared. The meal began with stuffed pineapple shells and ended with a flaming dessert, and it was complemented by several wines in between. A group of strolling musicians provided tableside music. Senator James Abourezk was spokesman for the Americans that night.
I think this is the largest group of Americans to come to Cuba since the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Sin embargo, considero que este es el grupo de americanos mayor que ha venido a Cuba después de la Bahía de Cochinos.
And we're grateful for the welcome that you've given us.
Nos sentimos agradecidos por la bienvenida que se nos ha dispensado.
I have been talking with the university officials tonight
He estado hablando esta noche con los funcionarios de la universidad
and have been authorized to offer an invitation to the Cuban basketball team to come to South Dakota.
y ellos han dado la autorización al equipo cubano para que visite Dakota del Sur.
However, before I extend the invitation,
Pero antes de que yo planteara la invitación,
I want to see how well our team does.
quiero ver
The next morning, the hospitable Cubans provided a full day of entertainment and sightseeing for the South Dakotans. First, there was a stopover at Revolutionary Square, which is dominated by a towering statue of the 19th century Cuban revolutionary Jose Marti, the most revered of all Cuban heroes. The 10,000-ton memorial was begun by dictator Batista in 1953 and finished in the year of the revolution, 1959. Across the square, it is faced by one of the myriad portraits of Che Guevara, which are found throughout the city of Havana, and flanked by a monstrous mural depicting other revolutionary leaders. Workmen were completing a massive wooden grandstand, which will be used for a living card display on May 1st, the traditional day of celebration in communist countries. But this was not to be a day of political indoctrination. Cuba is devoted to sports, and the visitors were on the island for athletic competition. So, the remainder of the day was spent inspecting the country's sports industry. That part of the story in a moment. Cubans are sport fanatics, and the people of Havana are immensely proud of their largest indoor athletic arena called Sports City. The 15,000-seat suspended bowl was built during the last 2 years of Batista's regime. When a newsman asked a guide how much it cost, the guide said, "Cost? We took it over in 1959. 4 world championships in fencing, boxing, gymnastics, and weightlifting have been held in this auditorium. And in addition, about 2,500 prisoners from the Bay of Pigs fiasco were held here for 2 or 3 days because all the jails on the island were full. Like all buildings in Cuba, there are slogans everywhere. The marquee proclaims to educate is to prepare the man for life. Inside, at 90 degrees from a portrait of Che Guevara is a quote from Fidel Castro: "Sport is the right of the worker." Like most buildings in Cuba, Sports City is getting a little seedy. It needs paint and refurbishing, but it's clean. And that, too, makes it like most things we saw in Cuba. Next stop on the South Dakotans' tour of the country's sports industry was a small factory built by the workers themselves in the days since the Revolution. A series of one-story, hangar-shaped buildings clustered together like so many old Army barracks. It is one of the nation's most valued industries because it manufactures the items that Cubans seem to prize the most: athletic gear, ranging from uniforms to equipment of all kinds. And here, too, was a sign. This one said, "To encourage the game is to support the revolution." There are no frills in this simple handcrafted business. Cooling is provided by the gentle blowing of hot air through the open-ended buildings. Incentives for the workers come in the form of worker bonuses, often a free box seat at a sporting event or a week at the beach. The sports industry of the Revolution became necessary when trade was shut off from the United States. Cuba used to depend on the States for all its sports equipment. When that avenue was blockaded due to political and ideological differences between the countries, Cuba developed its own resources. And this factory is a product of that development. They make everything necessary to keep the country going as one of the most sports-oriented nations in the world. They export very little. The people use it all themselves, perhaps to support Castro's quotation, "Sport is the right of the worker." Cuba's interest in athletics does not begin with manufacturing equipment, nor end with performance on the field. To the Castro regime, sports is a continuing educational program designed to bring honor to the country and good health to a deprived nation. To this end, the Ministry of Sports maintains a 4-year school called the Sports Institute. 1,200 students work and study full-time to become professional athletes, trainers, coaches, or teachers of athletics. 168 will graduate this year, most of them going to small towns to help build new athletic programs. Baseball is still Cuba's national pastime, and the dream of every young man is probably to play here in the 65,000-seat baseball stadium. All seats here are free, as they are everywhere for every sporting event in the country. But, of course, no country is without class or money consciousness. The best seats here go to workers who have been selected by their unions for performance, a form of privilege, if you will. Members of the news media broke away from the tour early on Tuesday. They were taken to the airport for the arrival of South Dakota Senator George McGovern. He, along with Senator Abourezk, had arranged for the games to be played, but that's not what made his arrival important. McGovern had not expected to attend, but then he had received what was called an urgent invitation from the Castros to be present for the games. This led to diplomatic speculation among members of the press. The speculation ended with talk of Yankees and basketball diplomacy.
We've got the best of two teams put together. We don't claim to be the New York Yankees, but I think we'll do well.
Senator, are you optimistic that relations will be improved now?
I have no doubt about it. I think it's going to take some time. I don't think it'll be easy. It won't happen overnight, but progress is being made on the fishing issue. I think progress can be made on these other questions. I have no doubt that in the course of time, relations will be normalized.
Is this basketball diplomacy?
I suppose it is basketball diplomacy. We've had some precedent for that in the ping-pong diplomacy with the Chinese that served very well. And I hope this can play a similar role.
Good.
While newsmen were at the airport greeting McGovern, the rest of the South Dakota delegation was back at the Marizul Hotel, waiting for the beginning of the basketball series between South Dakota and Cuba. KELO sports director Jim Burt picks it up from there.
The American and Cuban teams arrived at the Coliseum of the Sports City about an hour and a half before game time. The Cubans relaxed, were confident and in a jovial mood as they were dressed early and waited almost impatiently for the historic meeting with the Americans. The dressing room of the South Dakotans had a more serious atmosphere, the players contemplating the odds-on challenge they realized was ahead. Changing into uniforms was delayed after it was learned that game time had been set back a half hour. South Dakota State University trainer Jim Boer got an early start on the necessary taping session. As the battle line of the court was being drawn, assistant coaches Sam Milanovich of SDSU and Doug Martin of USD had these pregame observations.
Doug, what's your thoughts now in the dressing room just before this initial game with Cuba?
Well, you know, we were pretty excited when we went to Indiana this fall in our first ball game. And this game is much more exciting than that. I was just out in the arena and it's about full, holds 15,000. And it's the first American team in Cuba for many, many years, 16 years, I guess. So it's really exciting. We really don't know what to expect.
You know what team you're playing?
Well, this afternoon we heard that it's the national team and the team that played in the Olympics last year, minus several players moving up, and in their places they've moved up several young players who are quite outstanding. So we're playing their best team.
It's going to be quite a challenge for the young men.
It really is.
Sam, we know the boys haven't been able to practice a whole lot together, maybe 3 or 4 sessions, but any new wrinkles for the Cubans?
Well, not really, Jim. I think that our players have done an excellent job preparing themselves for a difficult thing. You get 5 players from one school and 5 from another, and you try to get them together a couple days, and they've really been cooperative, have adapted the international rules very well. I think that the big thing is the tempo of the game will be a little bit different, and they're going to adjust to that, and they're all heads-up players, and they'll have to go out and play the game that way, and I'm sure they will.
Among the last of the capacity 15,000 fans to arrive was South Dakota Senator George and Mrs. McGovern, Senator Jim Abourezk, the Swiss ambassador, and several Cuban government officials, including General Raul Castro. Seated in the upper level in plush red chairs under a huge portrait of national revolutionary hero Che Guevara. Finally, the big moment arrived. A thunderous standing ovation greeted the appearance of the South Dakota team, led by flag-bearing Ron Pedersen of USD. First game action was slow start, and USD Cagers started the contest at a coin toss. Jeff Nannon opened the scoring with a pair of free throws with 1:08 gone. Cuba, whose squad boasted 6 players from the 1976 Olympic team, didn't score until 1:43 elapsed. The score was tied 5 times in the first half. Cuba's first lead, 12-10, came with 6:49 gone in the half, and then began to increase the margin on free throws. A combination of superior rebounding, shooting, and defense propelled the Cubans to a 45-27 halftime bulge. The SDSU team came on with 4:50 gone in the first half, and substitution was made by units, a big disadvantage to the South Dakotans, who had little time to prepare for the games as a unit. The second half was more closely contested, with the Cubans outscoring the Americans 46-45 to win 91-72. High scores were Steve Brown and Larry Nicholson of SDSU with 14 and 13 points respectively. South Dakota State's 5 started the second game. USD came on with 6:51 gone in the first half, and it was a virtual repeat performance of the first game, with the bigger, stronger Cuban team outclassing the South Dakotans on the boards and in the shooting department. After the score was tied only a few times early in the game, the Cubans took charge, although the valiant South Dakotans battled back and pulled within 6 points, 50-44, with 5 minutes gone in the second half after Cuba led 42-27 at the intermission. Bob Sunvold with 16 and Steve Brown with 12 topped the American scores, with a final score of 88-69, making a 19-point spread in both games, as we pick up the final moments.
88-69. McDermott up to Freeman. Freeman long, shot to the side, short. Follow shot by Nicholson will not count at the horn. And the final score is Cuba 88, South Dakota 69.
At the conclusion of the second game, Leo Hartig talked with the South Dakota coaches.
Gentlemen, the crowd is gone now. The score was different from last night, but the difference was identical. How do you feel about the effort of coming down here?
Well, I think it was a tremendous opportunity for us, and as far as the basketball game was concerned, I thought our guys did a good job tonight. Once again, I thought they were a little tight early in the ball game. We missed some shots normally that go in during the year, and it was kind of frustrating tonight for some of the players, but they did a great job. They stayed in there, and I think the people appreciated the fact that they didn't give up. They played real hard, and there was nothing we can do about it. I think one of the factors in tonight's game that maybe didn't show up last night was the tremendous talent on this team tonight. I think it finally dawned on us how good these people were.
And it was a truly great experience, and I don't think anyone can imagine how kind and the people have been, and they just haven't been able to do enough things to make our visit here enjoyable. And I think it's the simple fact that they're interested in coming back to South Dakota to play possibly next year would be the kind of indication that they have appreciated us being here, and that the relationship has been very good. And with any luck at all, we hope to have them back in the Dakotas, which would be great for, again, South Dakota. The only thing I think that would top our experience here would be to have them come back. They have some fine athletes.
Following the excitement of Tuesdays and Wednesdays basketball games, Thursday became a day of rest for the South Dakota basketball teams. It was a gloomy, windy morning, but that didn't stop the players from congregating at the hotel's private beach for a chilly dip in the surf. With the sea running high, there wasn't much chance for swimming. Body surfing and tiptoeing through the breakers became the order of the day. With the day being what it was, there weren't too many observers of the players' hijinks. The KELO camera crew, 2 attractive school teachers who were on holiday from their children in Canada, and the watchful life observer who wanted to make certain that nothing happened to the important visitors from South Dakota. In the afternoon, the players did more catching up on relaxation and personal matters. Shopping is difficult to do in Cuba. Goods are scarce, and what luxury items are available are to be found only in government stores run for tourists and VIPs. Basketball team members took advantage of their shopping privileges Thursday afternoon to find presents for their families and friends back home. Their choices ran mainly to T-shirts, cigars, and bottles of Cuban rum. Not always the memento they wanted, but the one they could find that would remind them of Cuba. The South Dakota delegation's last night in Cuba was a night on the town. Remember the Tropicana nightclub from the movies you may have seen years ago? The club with spectacular dances and beautiful girls? Well, it's still in operation, and it's not just a tourist trap. Cubans visit there every night of the week, except Monday when it's closed. Prices are reasonable, and the show remains as spectacular as it was presented in the movies. The Cuban Tourist Bureau arranged the nightclub visit as a grand send-off for the South Dakotans, and all visitors appreciated the gesture. Finally, the trip was over. The South Dakota delegation made one last trip from the Marizul Hotel toward Havana. The trip along the highway was the same, but it seemed different. It was a last look at a strange and friendly land for many. They would probably never see this countryside again. The trip had been exciting for everyone, And at the airport, we asked Senator James Abourezk how it had come about.
In 1976, in January, I came to Cuba on a vacation and decided at the time that I would try to line up a sports exchange. I talked to the Cuban officials here about it. They agreed to it, and the State Department, however, disapproved it. There were political problems with Reagan challenging Ford in the presidential primaries. So when the trip was killed for that year, even though the university was all ready to go, in January of this year, when Jimmy Carter took over as president, I once again contacted the State Department, and they thought it over for a few days and then indicated their approval to me. So that's essentially why we're here today.
The trip is over now. Do you feel it was a great success for everybody?
I think it was a tremendous success. In terms of basketball diplomacy, it was wonderful. It was a great experience for all the South Dakotans who came here. I think it means a lot for US-Cuban relations, which I think have been strained for too long and ought to be normalized.
From there on, it was all homecoming excitement. The same DC-9 picked up the travelers and took them to Homestead Air Base in Florida for customs inspection, and there the press was waiting for interviews. The same story was repeated in Washington, D.C. News people in every area wanted to hear the South Dakota players' reaction to Cuba. Then, it was home to Sioux Falls. Home were the players, home from the sea.
Over here.
Okay.
This Sunday night on 30, we'll talk more about Cuba. Our point of view will be different then. For Howard Phillips and Jim Burt, I'm Leo Hartig. Good evening.